So, for those of you who are in attendance, which again is not as many as we would normally get because we had to shift this session from last week's date to this week to make sure that we weren't all tied up in the MVP summit that most of us have been at. Nevertheless, this is going to be a little bit of a new approach for us. We've done lots of stuff around the maturity model in general and the competences with rock star presenters talking about those different competences. But for about a year, we've been trying to come up with a way of doing stuff which is a bit more concrete, less philosophical maturity model, and more let's just grab the tools and do something maturity model. And to that end, we've had this idea of having, help me out, guys, what are we actually calling these now? Practical scenarios. Practical scenarios, which are taking a practical scenario and then using maturity model principles to think through how do you mature that practical scenario. These would tend to be a lot more technology specific, whereas generally we've been technology agnostic wherever possible. So to all that end, what we thought we'd do was take a look at Microsoft Loop, because it's shiny and new and many of us don't know much about it yet. It's got some really interesting practical scenario usage, and we happen to know one of the global rock stars when it comes to Loop, which is the rather finely accented Darrell Webster. Darrell, do you want to do your own introduction?
Yes, and I've been told I need to enunciate my words more clearly because some people from around the world have commented on my videos and said I say all sorts of things that they think I don't. Anyway, it's about as good as transcription for Microsoft Teams in a New Zealand accent. My name is Darrell Webster, also known as Darrell. This is a service in the community. I'm based out of Auckland, New Zealand. I'm wearing black clothes. I've got no hair. I'm wearing glasses and a big smile on my face because this is actually my first practitioner session. So I'm really honoured to be here. I'm an adoption and change management specialist, and I've been playing with M365 in its various different flavours since 2013.
Cool. Good. Nice job. And we heard every word, which is more than I can usually manage. Right, we're just going to run through our usual introductory slides. So the agenda today, we're going to do the intro stuff that tells people who are complete newcomers to the maturity model practitioner sessions about the maturity model and what this is all about. We'll do a shout out to the people who attended, grab some pictures, and talk about how people might want to contribute and get involved in this whole edifice of maturity modeling. And then we'll hand over completely to Darrell to talk us through his thoughts, his perspectives on how to use maturity modeling wrapped around Loop, or vice versa. It's not clear which one of those it is. If you want to attend further sessions, grab this link right here. It'll come up again towards the end, but this will download an ICS set that will drop straight into your Outlook calendar and will give you all of the rest of the year's practitioner sessions just in one hit. It's very good, apart from when we change something on the fly like we did this month. So yeah, come along next month and see what we're talking about then. To that effect, thank you. That effect, next slide, please. Oh, Marc stopped moving. That's a bad sign because he's sharing the calendar.
Let's see if I can move it forward.
He's shared it from his desktop. So do you want me to flick on over to?
If you can, that would be kind of excellent.
Yeah, let's do that.
Just wondering, is PowerPoint Live part of the maturity model anywhere?
It's a very good question, Kevin. I think there's an excellent opportunity for you to do a practical scenario session on that.
Unfortunately, it's taking a long time to upload. I think that was the issue. So
I have also heard, actually, I know Vesa Yuvinen has issues with the recordings when it comes through from that. So that may be an excuse.
Yeah, it's a big slide deck because it's got video embedded, so it's taking a while to upload. Yeah, it's to do with spotlighting, wasn't it? I think they were talking about that at Summit. So yeah, I think we can talk about that.
I was
Is
just
my
about to
desktop
say,
coming through
careful
soon?
what you say next. Yeah, we can see send notification popping up.
Okay, so do you see a desktop with all
Yeah,
sorts
we
of
do.
jumble? You do, okay.
We
Yeah.
can see PowerPoint and stuff behind that.
I think we need a branch on the maturity model too, which also talks about working across multiple tenants, and when logins get confused and think that you were using your old domain and not your new domain.
Yes, quite.
All right, let's get in the presentation mode. Next slide.
Okay.
You
Is
said.
Is
Next
anyone
slide,
level
please.
400 at that?
Fantastic. There we go. There we go. Right. So as usual, we've got a purpose behind all of this, and ultimately it's about trying to actually help organisations be better at their use of technology. Although we're technology agnostic in theory, it's all sort of referenced to the capabilities that Microsoft keep giving us, because that then goes on and creates business capability, and that's what we want to improve. But it's a very structured model, so it lets you understand where you are and what the steps or potential steps are in order to be better at a whole bunch of different competencies within your business or organization. So then on the right, we've got the artifacts that we have published to date, and I'm just quickly, that's fully up to date. We may, at the moment, we're managing to turn out one new competency every couple of months in reality, because there's quite a lot to these competencies. The most recently published one was the cognitive business, which is a deep dive into how to adopt artificial intelligence and machine learning within organizations. What does that look like? And rather encouragingly, most of us can't talk a lot about this, but there's a really good synergy between what we proposed in this model and what Microsoft have been talking about over the last week with the MVPs around this co-piloting approach to having AIs working alongside people, not replacing them, not working for them, but being part of the team. So anyway, this is a stack of the competencies, and you can see that they're quite business focused. We have a couple more in progress. They take a random amount of time. I've made some progress on the data analytics one in the last couple of weeks, but still at least a month away. Employee experience, something around that we're working on, and we really must get our fingers out and get the security competency worked on, because our security colleagues keep giving us a hard time about that. There are some tools to help you actually run your own maturity model workshops within organizations, whether that's your organization as a member of staff, or whether you're a consultant and want to run these as part of your sort of business consulting practice. Either's good. And there are a set of supporting articles. All of this stuff is published on the Microsoft Learn platform and is also accessible through GitHub, with the ability to interact and suggest improvements or enhance the artifacts through GitHub. So if we jump to the next slide, I'm lucky, it'll tell me that. It doesn't, it's the other slide. Hey, good enough. So the maturity model has 5 levels for those of you that have not seen it before. This is the general description. We start off at level 100, which is the sort of where you start when you don't really know what you're doing, whether that's a new business or a new company or a new process. You're kind of just making it up and trying to figure it out, and you very rapidly want to move up from level 100, making up as you go along level, to something a lot more stable. And usually that stable level is somewhere around level 300, and you pass through level 200 where you're trying to do all the right things, but some of the things that you're trying to do don't work, and some of the people you want to do the right things aren't doing them. And when you get to level 300, mostly you've got a good, solid, stable organization with good, solid processes. They're not world changing, but they're fit for purpose. Then we move up into the upper echelons, level 400, where you've got active processes for improving your processes and capabilities, and level 500, where you've got techniques for optimizing that, often, interestingly, using AI and really potent and automated, maybe auto-remediating feedback loops. So this is what the maturity model looks like. We've got some descriptions. There's a really deep dive in the overall introduction to maturity modeling. But on the right, we've got some nice simple statements, this intent column, which helps people really understand the maturity model in a sort of a human context. And I really like let's just keep putting out the fires and keep the lights on. I know lots of organizations that remain at the level of just trying to keep the fires out and the lights on. Right. What we then do is we take this set of principles, and we start to apply it to different competencies when we're talking about competencies. What we're going to try and do, and maybe Darrell's going to show us that, who knows, is also apply that to some specific practical scenarios. So next slide. Right, so we probably ought to do this thing, which is where we capture everybody's happy, smiling, waving faces. It's going to be a lightweight group. What we will ask you to do is turn your video on. Thank you, Kevin. We will try and shift it into together mode. Let's go with that and see if this is going to work for us. And I'm going to make that main. And then I've done this right. I'm going to see if I can do a capture on that. Fantastic. And I'm going to do it again. If everybody could wave, please. Got it. Lovely. Cracking job. And before I forget, I'm going to just save that image. Simon, do you want to pick up the conversation from here while I just grab that screenshot?
Might help if I unmute myself. We'd love you to get involved in the discussion, and you can get involved and contribute in 2023. Buttons generally always move around a bit, but by reacting when you like things, when you want to get involved and come and chat with us, and you've got some ideas, then if you could raise your hand and switch your camera on, that'd be fantastic, and we'll bring you into the conversation. We'll also keep an eye on the chat as well if you are a bit more shy and would like to just to chat in the background. We will look to respond there as well. If we could move to the next slide, please, Darrell. As ever, this is a community-run effort, and we would love you to get involved. And I have to say, I think since the start of 2023, we've been getting a lot more people getting involved and talking to us more via the means which we have. So if you want to get involved, there's a few links for you. Things which we'd love to hear about are presenting a case study on how the maturity model for Microsoft 365 has helped, how you've used it, and maybe how it hasn't helped. It'd be also interesting to hear about what isn't working too. If you've got issues or discussions, if you want to make changes to the maturity model, you can do that through GitHub as well. On the articles, there's an edit button, so you can make and fix our typos. But yeah, we'd love to hear feedbacks and get your thoughts. So please use that get involved link. All the recordings are put onto YouTube, and there's a link down below, and we'll put those in the chat in a second. And there's a link as well to the various spreadsheets and approach to running a workshop. Thanks. Move forward. That's perfect. Thank you, Darrell. Upcoming topics we've got. So today we've got Darrell, our rockstar for this month, on applying the maturity model to Microsoft Loop. Next month, I think we've got Kevin and I think Leslie as well, talking to us about Viva and the maturity model, which should be fantastic. So yeah, it's really great that's happening. We've got further ones. You can see that we've got a couple of TBAs. I think syntax is locked in, accessibility, and in September we're looking for a rock star, and also for data analytics. And I know there are some discussions with some rock stars around the data analytics one as well. But if you've got a suggestion for a topic in November, please let us know. Otherwise we will come up with. There's all sorts. It's got to be Copilot, hasn't it? I imagine. But anyway, there we go. Right. Anyway, next slide. As this is part of the It is part of the PMP, the Microsoft PMP Patterns and Practices community about sharing, caring. You can, to sort of kind of help you get involved. There are various sessions on helping you to become a first-time contributor, how to write for the web, how to write articles for the community docs as well, which fantastic resources, and there's links there, aks.ms/sharing-is-caring. Thank you to everybody who joined us in March, would it be?
It would be.
And yeah, it's great to have you all there. So thank you for that. And our next session is May the 16th. So and we're talking about Viva and the maturity model. So yeah, that should be a really good one with all the emphasis on employee experience. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand over to Darrell and Simon, who have really been spending a lot of time on this while we were sunning it up on the MVP, and I know Summit last week. But yeah, this is a discussion around Microsoft Loop maturity model, and as we said before, please react, get involved, raise your hand if you'd like to, if you've got comments or ideas, and you want to ask questions and provide your input to this session. So I'll hand it over.
Awesome. Thank you, Simon. And also thank you, Simon, for the prep before MVP Summit as well. I was not one of the lucky ones to go, but definitely appreciated the crash course in maturity model. I've actually looked on and thought it's actually quite cool to see it develop and grow, because yeah, often organizations don't know, how do I measure, how am I progressing, where am I at? And it's good to see that it isn't necessarily dependent on tool, but it's agnostic. It's more about scenarios than it is about the technology and the buttons. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting session because it is focused in a technology, but it is still focused in scenarios. And so I'm going to try and take us through a bit of an intro, making some assumptions. There might be one or two that are new-ish to Microsoft Loop, and what is it? Some of us have seen it come in various early forms and thought, what's that button? Clicked on it and thought, okay, yeah, whatever, and moved on. So yeah, we'll see. It's interesting to talk about maturity model and maturity in a product that's so immature. A bit like me. I think that's why I relate to it. Yeah. Goals, right. Well, the team got together and had an initial look at Microsoft Loop, thinking, what sort of space would Loop sort of fit across here in terms of competencies and things to measure against. And yeah, as an initial thought, and this is actually also open to the practitioners on the call to help refine this, I believe. That's right. These are how these sessions are run and going forward. But yeah, we might, maybe our view might change after the presentation in terms of what it might cover. Thinking in terms of cognitive business, infrastructure. Actually, you know what? It's the green ones we want to focus on. I flip these around. We'll have a look at a different slide a bit later. But you're familiar with the competencies. Keep these in mind as we look at Loop and what it does. Yeah, let's just move on with that. So what is Loop? Well, first of all, it's a great buzz video. In fact, an awesome movie that we saw 2 years ago and thought, okay, when's the sequel? But it is a application and a feature within applications. And that was the interesting thing about it. All about aiding us in our thinking, our planning and creating process. And so it was, first of all, actually, I've got the timeline to sort of walk through it. I think it's the next one here. No, it isn't. We'll talk about the two parts of Loop to begin with. What did land first in sort of 2-ish years ago was Loop components, the portable or atomic units of productivity. Thank you for the marketing language. I actually thought on that a bit longer afterwards and thought, yeah, actually, that's not a bad description, because when we think about Loop and you get into using it, it is about these little pieces of things that you put together to help you collaborate in a moment or in a session or in the Loop app. you add them to conversations and within apps that you work on and where you share your ideas. And this is something that's been a growing story that we'll see as we look at the timeline. The Loop app is the latest thing to come out. It's the thing that I guess everyone was hoping for much, much sooner. And it actually, for me, was an interesting way for Microsoft to introduce a technology. First of all, it was the feature without the app, and then it was the app. And a lot of people kind of got lost in this. Well, where do I use this and how do I find my stuff? It's over here, it's over there, it's everywhere, and it's in OneDrive. So the Loop app now brings workspaces, which bring the thinking, the planning, the creating together in that space. Something else that I think we need to consider as we look at the maturity model is storage. And how do we manage this and managing membership and all those sorts of interesting questions. Loop components are stored in the OneDrive of the person who adds or creates the component. So Simon and I were in a chat. We're in our own organization. Guest access isn't supported yet, but let's say we're in the same organization. I add it to a chat. I add it to an Outlook email and send it to him. And it's stored in my OneDrive. And it's like a new file. And it's shared with Simon and we can collaborate on it. Then there's the Loop app. And I was one of the lucky organizations participating in the private preview. And this has been an interesting space. Something that I kind of have to be careful as I talk about it and skirt around, because I think there's something in here that hasn't quite been announced yet. But and certainly early on, Loop app storage and workspaces were in SharePoint. And we saw that quite clearly. We could go into the team site and see that. There's been a blog post released around the launch of the Loop app that talks a little about where those files are stored. They are using SharePoint. But today, things have changed a little. Like we know it's still SharePoint somewhere, but it's this new storage space, and we'll probably hear more about that probably at the M365 conference, I expect. So what about Loop? How did it roll out and how did it progress? Well, we saw it in Teams chat and Meetings chat. And this is why, like, I think while it was a difficult thing to drive adoption or to see any purpose or use in it, it actually made sense to introduce as a way of collaborating within the flow of work and within the flow of an idea. We'll see something of a look at the idea and cycle of an idea. But where do a lot of our ideas come up? They're in conversation. We're chatting, and then we get an inspiration, and then we're scratching around for a piece of paper, a digital paper. Your OneNote or mine. Are we in the same team? What do we need to share? I'll fire up a Word doc. Oh, look, it's too hard. It's too hard. Let's just drop our notes in the chat, and then we'll come back to it later. And that's actually what Loop was. It was adding that Loop document really quickly, Loop component, and you'd start to collaborate, and there'd be very low friction as you get started. You just get on with it. You get on with your ideation. Because it was part of Teams chat, and I say private chat, the whole kind of private meetings and private chats became available to private meetings as well, and maybe a little less usage there. Not yet available in Teams conversations and channels. Waiting to see what's happening there. I think there's a few things to figure out in terms of how that's shared and what sort of experience they want to tie that to. But what was next? They rolled it out to Outlook email, and that was interesting. Like, okay, we'll attach a loop to an email, and what does that mean? Okay, well, we can send around a component which is crowdsourcing answers to get back to a customer, and maybe we want to copy something else that's part of a Teams chat and add it into an email as well as a way of reaching more people across our org. But one of the things about the Outlook email scenario was now our notifications, when we get mentioned in the loop, start to turn up and they're actually live. So I don't have to open up this document anymore. It's embedded in my email. I can start to collaborate right there and then. In both of these scenarios, we've got whole sorts of questions around compliance and what does it mean for a changing message and the integrity of what we're trying to say versus the email and the message around it. So yeah, lots of sorts of things I think that are still being discussed and figured out in terms of what does that mean for an organization. Moving along, this is more recently, Word Online. Component in Word Online, what does that even mean? Okay, I thought we'd just use Word and comments, but we can embed a component inside of Word as a way of managing our tasks, coming up with ideas and the like. So I think we'll have a look at this again in the life cycle, but it's not necessarily that you add the loop into the Word document, but you could actually start it from somewhere, like a chat, like an Outlook, like a Teams meeting, come up with your ideas, and then drop it into your Word document to help guide the creation of the document. Then Microsoft Whiteboard, interesting place. I mean, Loop doesn't have any inking capabilities or kind of sort of contextual grabbing things and dragging things, spatial ideation. So Whiteboard's going to fit that space, and that's reasonably new too. The Loop app turned up in a couple of months back, and along with it, this mysterious kind of, oh, look, task list. I can create a task list, and it happens to synchronize with Planner and To-Do in the background. That's kind of handy. So that set up the next one, which was more about meeting notes, which is it's actually rolling out now. I've been able to attach meeting notes to an invite or to a meeting as you're meeting, capturing those notes, capturing those follow-up tasks, and then they become a place where you can manage the tasks out of Planner and To-Do as well. And then question mark. What does the future look like? Well, I don't know. It's kind of rolling out as it is, and we don't really have a roadmap that's been published, just things that are coming. But hopefully what you see here is there's two sides to this coin. There is the experience of where we are working, and then there's the Loop app that brings it all together. And we'll take a closer look at both, but that's where perhaps the delays and the slowness are. And it's also a focus of where our consideration is in terms of maturity and how we might be collaborating. Does Loop make it easier? Does it bring a lower friction way of just starting an idea in the place that we're working and sharing that to the place that we're working? And does the Loop app bring that all together so we can have a simple place to, capture it all? So revisiting the competencies, I think that Loop is pretty much across the collaboration communication space. I haven't, mastered or fully understood any of the other areas, but I do see certainly that it's in that early stage of developing an idea. And as that idea grows and we work together and we pull more people in, we loop more people in, then we are leveraging Loop for collaboration. In some fashion, it kind of also fits in the communication space. Not that we're replacing chat or we're having whole big conversations in a Loop workspace, but we certainly use the comment feature and being able to develop a way for our own team of how we might use those comments and manage work and status updates and comments on certain ideas. So, yeah, lots of different things that we'll look at. And I do have to, I've got this terrible habit, and Marc knows this, where I get so carried away with the tech, the ideas, the showing stuff that I look up and I go, oh, 5 minutes left. Q&A? No? Okay, right. So I do want to leave plenty of time for that. We don't need to talk to every point in the slide, Darrell. Maturity model in terms of Loop. Wow, okay, like I said, maturity for an immature product. In fact, a product which is more about, I live in the chaos, the chaos of an idea, and I guide that along. So if we start at the level 100, we're exploring Loop. It's a place where we might try it out. It's where we might be in a one-on-one chat, or we add something to an email. We're testing it out. And this was kind of where people looked at it and thought, well, they didn't even notice it. It was this little button that was added at the bottom of a Teams chat, a messaging extension, if I can get all Teamsy about it. But, for most of us, it was like a little circly thing with a corner on it, and I'll click that, and what happens? I don't know. But there was no structure. In fact, that's kind of what I mean by it lives in the chaos space. No guidance as to when to use Loop. It was just, here it is, go for your life. So what's this? Let's try it. Oh, that's interesting. It kind of looks useful. That might be how people are exploring that in that initial phase. They're trying things out with people. There is this obscure little way of having a conversation with yourself in Teams, which some people use to, note to self is the Outlook equivalent, and you can start a little loop with yourself as well and create it that way. Managed. Yeah, what does that phase look like for loop? It's forming the patterns around how we might use loop and use it as a individual, beginning to form some habits around the common scenarios that we might use, and we're trying those things out. So using it in a meeting, starting to use it in a one-on-one check-in with your person that you're managing or your direct report, and other scenarios as well. So it's like using loop this way works kind of well. What do you think? Should we use it this way? And we're working now that way of working for ourselves. What I like about this, if you are open and you have an open, collaborative, relaxed, collaborative culture, you are talking about these things with people, and you're saying, well, how does this work? Does this work or not work? Let's try it out. Let's not. How can we do it better? Defined within the loop team, or using loop with a team, we kind of agree on a way of working and using it. We're maybe even documenting how we do that, perhaps even using loop. So we might have a workspace that we're using within the loop app, or we've got maybe a space that we have our ways of working that we've defined in our team, and we're starting to land on some things that work for us. Okay, team, this is how we use loop. We are using it for these scenarios, and we're exploring some more. Let's add to our ways of working. Predictable. Loop could become an essential tool to collaboration for some. We're certainly making it that way as we start to use it for facilitating projects and ideation. The team knows how to use it. There's some recognizable patterns as they come into those workspaces, and they think, oh yeah, this is I know my way around here. This is a project that Darrell's run, and yeah, I've been invited to a workspace. It's been shared with me. I know how to use it. I know how to contribute. Lastly, there is this space that I think Microsoft definitely wants us to think about and look on, especially for those of us who have some development experience. That not only are we optimizing and thinking how could we use Loop better as components or as the app, but this other area where you can develop your own Loop adaptive cards or Loop components to bring in content from your business systems. So there's that kind of main highest goal there of what can we do to make it easy to bring our content into our conversations and into the places that we work. We've seen a few things hinted at when, like at Build, I think there was the Dynamics CRM and a couple of other partners that were building things, SAP, and it's that kind of like live component, which is the old name of Loop, of bringing that content in from that system and having that conversation and using that. Maturity. Well, okay, life cycle of an idea is another way I like to think of this with Loop, because it is about ideation and then building things up. I've got an idea, I'm on my own or I'm in a conversation. So I might start that idea right here. I could be on a bus, on a train. I could be, as I said, talking with Simon, and we come up with something. And, we share that idea. We talk about it. We start to draft it. And this is where it's really rough. We don't have to have anything filled out in any kind of form or format, but we're just making sure that we're capturing those thoughts and that we can potentially order those sorts of things. And I have, a real interest in using spatial type tools as well for this. I like whiteboards. I like Miro. I like things where I can drag stuff around and I've done that with OneNote in the past too. So the idea grows. We share it, we draft it. We start to share that idea with more people because it's no longer in the secret squirrel garage area, but maybe we do need to loop in some other expertise, some other subject matter experts. We perhaps start to put some tasks around this idea, and maybe even a project starts to form. The task is worked on, deliverables are worked on too and completed, or they're still in progress, but there's that idea that's actually really starting to grow and take fruition, and then the idea is launched. So that's my basic understanding of an idea. I did try to choose our colors too, just had to point that out. But what does that look like in terms of Loop? Well, in that idea phase, early phase, we add in a component to a conversation or the place that we're working. We share that component and loop in other people. So that could be where it's Simon and I, and then we loop in Marc or whoever else to add to the expertise. Then we add the component to a loop workspace. Yeah, we could add more people into that one single loop that's living in my OneDrive, but I'm beginning to attach that loop now to the workspace, make it available for the team that's already working on a similar idea or whatever, and it's much easier to share it that way. We build that loop page out because a component isn't just a single bullet pointed list or a task list or a table or something, but we start to add more to the page. And then we bring that content into a richer app, right? Because Loop is a fancy notepad, which does a lot of other things. And maybe for what you're trying to bring to reality in terms of your idea or project, of course, you're going to shift over to something that makes it look gorgeous or helps you facilitate building out documents and all that sort of stuff. But there could be a future where Loop also becomes the document and the place where it is actually finished. And then we, go and execute on that. We run a conference or whatever. Yeah. Right. I'm kind of trying to anchor this in terms of a demo. I did want to try and avoid what Marc suffered earlier, which is outages and delays and stuff. So I put this massive big video file in here. It's best experienced when we upload this into PowerPoint Live, so that you see the local experience. I do apologize that I'm sharing that on my desktop. I couldn't figure out how to sign in somehow and give myself permission. The Microsoft tenant thinks that I'm an old address. So this might come across as a bit jittery, but I will share the file a bit later with the practitioners if you'd like, and probably do a voiceover to help out with that. So let's play and do a watch party. We're in a chat here, conversation with Laura, and sort of thinking about how do we promote Viva Engage to market and retail teams. So I've added a loop component to that team's chat. I'm adding a few things and sending that off to her. She's receiving it and she thinks, great, good idea. I'll add some thoughts to it as well. And so she starts to build out this list of things and ways that we might build that scenario. She's responded. I'm back and forth. Love it, of course. And from here, we actually want to loop in someone else. And so we're going to turn this into a meeting and invite Matt. But I'm also going to take that same loop and I'll copy a link to it and I'll add it to the meeting invite so that we can all find it later. It's attached there. It's in our calendar and just all kind of feels quite natural and easy to find. So this is Matt's experience. He goes to his Outlook. He sees it all embedded there, responds to say, yes, I'm coming to the meeting, definitely. And then we all start to join the meeting, join. And while we're in the meeting, I also take that same link and I post it into the chat there as a way of just helping everyone find it while we're in the meeting. Now, Matt has a better way of using it while he's in a meeting. He likes to use it kind of a more full screen experience. So he opens up the chat, because you know how chat is separate and then you've got your meeting window. So he's going in there and adding a few changes to the ideas of how to promote Engage as a way of working for our frontline people. He adds a task list. Great idea, because we actually want to get some help from one of our designers with creating an infographic. So we've added that, assigned that task. We'll end the meeting now and carry on and actually start to bring this thing to action. Now we're in the Loop app where, there you go. There's the loop and the component in the recent area, and I've added it to a workspace, or I'm adding it to a workspace now. So I'll drop that into the project and we'll see that appear now. We'll just visit it. And all new pages seem to drop down the bottom there. So we'll just drag it into a sub-page area to kind of keep things in order. Give it some decoration to help recognize it. And we'll also add a design brief for our designer who's going to help us create the infographic. So I might go out and grab a few ideas and inspirations for how I might want that infographic to look. And I'll copy that image, I'll drop it into the loop as well, a couple of other images, maybe leave the link behind there as to where I got that from. We need to invite our designer to the workspace, so let's just do that. We'll add Elizabeth so that she can get a hold of all the context of this project as well, and take it from there. So we've done that. She's building out a draft of the infographic in PowerPoint, because all designers love PowerPoint. Yeah, right. And she's grabbed a link to that. She'll add it into the loop, so it's easy to find. There it is. Now, that's the end of the demo-ish. Really what I was trying to show there was a flow in terms of, how does that work in terms of a scenario and the cycle of that idea. It started out in a conversation. It looped in other people. It eventually made it through to the team as we're working more on it. It started to get some tasks attached to it and some weight. And we started to list out the deliverable, the ideas, the briefing. We even dropped a link in there to the document as well. And so maybe this would have happened across a couple of meetings, in the meeting chat, a couple of emails, 2 or 3 documents, conversations everywhere. I don't know, can't find my way around. But what I like about Loop and working in the Loop app, that it's all about trying to bring it all into that flat single canvas space, making it easier for people to find everything related to that idea, that conversation, those set of tasks, and using that as a way of reducing the friction. So I also wanted to talk a little about a couple of other scenarios, and I guess this is the fortunate place where I'll just very quickly, because I want to keep it open to conversation, looking at some examples of how we've been using Loop. And you've seen the meeting scenario, so that's cool. How do we build a document? I've got a screenshot there, but I've also got somewhere under here the actual document. Blow this up. This was an on again, off again feature, because it was there and it was rolled out, and then they put a hold on it, and then they brought it back again. This is a Word document, and you might think, well, why would I put Loop into Word? I've got a comments feature somewhere here where I can just select some text and add some comments. Isn't that good enough? And wouldn't we just put our ideas on the page? But maybe your project, your idea, your thing started in a loop, in a meeting, and then you want to bring it into the document that you're working on. So this is one way to do it. We've been experimenting a bit with using a loop to coordinate the document and other things around it. So we might drop in some tasks, the outline, maybe a list of the resources and references of what we might need to refer to within our document, and we could sort of drop in a voting table to think about, okay, what should we address first, and what do we think? We've also started to use something of a status update, like, okay, well, what's next and what have we been working on? So this kind of running notes idea, and using a date picker to be able to say, well, that's still a month ago. But anyway, you get the idea. Loop is embedded in the document, and then we can get on with the document a bit further down. And lastly, let's have a look. Excuse me. This is a workspace that we're using to run a multi-stream project. It is Viva Connections rebuild of an intranet coming over to SharePoint Online. It is also rolling it out to frontline workers on mobiles, and Viva Engage is part of it too. So with our projects, we have discovery sessions, we have scopes, we have different work streams and things that we've got to do. So we use the workspace to frame up, okay, what is this project about, and where might we need to go to get ideas and get up to speed. What about our sessions? Well, each session had a page, and we did our discovery. We even had a space here for design requirements and referring back to the different Miro boards and things that we might have used, or brand guidelines. our project manager's got into it, and she's sort of building out a table for all the notes that she builds and captures in most of these significant meetings, statements of work that we might reference, and then we're using sort of sub pages and sections down here for the two main work streams, your intranet work stream and your Viva Engage work stream. So capturing your meetings, then each of these pages becomes something of a deliverable. So it is about, okay, well, what is that that we're working on? And, you know, we might assign some of those tasks to people as well. There's a few good examples around here. But the idea is that rather than us having to stretch ourselves across multiple conversations to try and find the document, the thing, the task, the whatever, we're centering a page around a deliverable, and we're sort of pulling that together so it's easier to find and people can work on that. And we're capturing that important information. So we're finding that quite useful. And as one of the strengths of Loop is that it supports synchronous and asynchronous work. So our US team members that are working on things for a New Zealand-based company, they pitch and they do their thing in their hours. We've got a Polish-based designer who's doing motion graphics, and someone else is doing something else. So yeah, all sorts of things there. And certainly we would not claim to be mature with our use of Loop, but you can sort of see that over projects like this, how we began to build our way of working and our level of maturity that kind of works for us. So those are a couple of examples. Now, very abrupt end.
Could I interrupt with an observation? I mean, I think you've just shown a sort of a process that most people wouldn't have even thought of yet. You know, I think loop components are sort of if you think about it, it's the most the lowest maturity level, right? It's one small little thing, you use it and you sort of throw it away. You know, let's build an agenda, let's brainstorm something. And then that little component you sort of abandon once you say, yep, that's our list, or that's our whatever. You've shown that apps are a little bit more mature. You can embed multiple components, and then that whole process where you went from place to place and different people are handing things back and forth. That's another level of maturity. So I think organizations are going to have to go through that thinking. You know, oh, here's a little toy. Here's a sort of nice tool. Here's a process enabler. And then from there, you know, maybe that's level 300, and then from there, we'll see where Loop goes, right?
Yeah. I think that's definitely a mission accomplished. Marc understood. Yes,
I did. I mean, I think you've shown some things that people haven't even considered doing yet, which shows your level of maturity.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I think what was interesting too, Marc, in that sort of throwaway space, that loops did feel like throwaway, didn't they? And like we're attaching them to this and that, and they're just been dumped in our OneDrives, and that was like a information manager's nightmare. And what if someone leaves? It was all, I don't know. But how do we bring those ideas and from those spaces and from the outskirts and the cold? A recent discovery was this recent area in the Loop app, which was quite cool, that I could see. If I've got an example down here, a couple of things that were discussed and added to chats and meetings and things, and we could just open that up, add it to our workspace, and now it all starts to have a home rather than being here, there, and everywhere. Really helpful. But yeah, I'll leave that open too. Like we were going to our Q&A section. I tried to get a little fancy with the Loop logo.
I ruined it for you. I started talking while you were spinning your Loop thing.
No, it's far more important to get the questions and comments in. So yeah, feel free to raise your hand, open it up. If I can show you anything too, you know, maturity model wise, it's interesting. It's an interesting journey to be on.
So there was a question that another Marc asked, which I want to just drill into a bit further. So if you create a component and share it with me, and then I think something else I want to do, and I create a component and share it with you, and we've got two components, we're both working on them, maybe to do with the same project or idea, and now we want to actually combine those. So yours is in your OneDrive, mine's in my OneDrive. We then want to create a workspace for that. What's the process of adding it to the workspace, and where are those components at the end of adding it to the workspace?
Yeah, great one. We can actually see that in action for some of that. Let's try and find that chat thing again down here somewhere. No. Oh, here's a chat with Chris. It's probably unrelated, but we'll open it up anyway. So this was within a chat. And the good thing is now I don't have to just open these components in office.com. I can open them in the Loop app. Great. It still feels like it has a home. We've got an area up here where the source of this was a chat. And now I can add it to a workspace. So we did see that in action in the video. And from here, I've got a picker of which workspace I want to add it to. So I'm going to add it to this brand new project so it doesn't confuse people in the Fonterra project. At the top of the page, it's told me that it's thinking about that and now it's finished, and I can click through to the workspace where that is. So for information's sake, it still sat in the OneDrive of the person who was working on it. But it's been linked through to this workspace. It hasn't been moved there now, and that's something that certainly we're giving feedback for the Loop team. But what does that mean, where the file lives? And if we did move it, would it break the links in all the places where it was embedded, and what's the experience for collaboration there? So lots of, understanding nods. Great
and what
question.
happens if we throw the originator out of the company and his OneDrive is no longer, his OneDrive? What happens then?
Yeah, well, it's exactly like if it no longer exists or it's been shut down or archived, then that loop, wherever it's embedded, kind of disappears. You get this little message to say, sorry, I've got nothing to load, thanks. As soon as you move, and I know we're getting sort of technical about this, not so much maturity model like, but if you move a loop from OneDrive to OneDrive, another drive, as soon as it goes out of that drive, it loses its loop power. And early on, some of us might have played with that. We grabbed the file, we tried to drop it into a team, and went, okay, doesn't work.
Okay.
But the thing is, like, it's also a problem they're trying to solve around compliance and running discovery. That how do we grab that file, rehydrate it, put it somewhere so we can actually see it in that state, and we're also not interrupting the way that it looks, just spoiling the evidence, so to speak. So still lots to think about, which is why the Loop app rolled out default off.
Okay. And just following through for my clarity, so is it always the case that it goes in the originator's OneDrive, or did you say earlier on that if I was to create that as part of a Teams a Teams channel, it's stored in SharePoint behind the scenes as opposed to OneDrive?
Right. So I did want to mix up the functionality that hasn't appeared yet. We don't have Loop in Teams channels yet. We expect that it will be stored in the SharePoint site for the team, but we don't know. And I think we're getting hints here as to if we look at workspaces, they're going into this strange, mysterious new storage which is powered by SharePoint, but we can't touch it. We don't see it in our SharePoint admin center. Okay, well, how do we manage this thing? So,
and the reason I raise this is that, in terms of maturity model, thinking about where you originate a Loop component may become something that more mature organizations do. And not mature organizations just spin them off anywhere and don't have a strategy for sharing or storing or managing or complying with all those components. Or as Marc said, at some point either archiving them or turning them into a record where they can no longer be updated.
Yeah, my hope would be that they find a middle ground, because if you throw another level of choice in the ideation process, then you go back to your OneNote or mine, your thing or mine. Where do we store this thing? What do we have shared? So we really need a way to move a loop along in the life cycle to the place that we want it, but maintain all the places that it has been collaborated with.
Okay.
Yeah. And in terms of maturity model too, I like the way that Marc summarized it, but any other thoughts about maturity in terms of, using Loop, and does it fit as a tool? Kevin, hey.
Sorry, my Teams was being a bit slow, so I was like, yeah, I clicked it. No, I haven't. Yeah, I have. I kind of feel in terms of the levels you have. I'm not entirely convinced. Sorry, Mark's waving at me. Oh, he's off. I'm not entirely convinced this should have a maturity model yet, because I kind of feel that it's not mature. It's changing so fast. It kind of seems strange, and I also feel that we should shift everything down, because I think there's going to be a longer term one. I was talking in the chat about governance and elements like that we just can't do really yet in terms of old loops. Where are they? Where do they sit unused and things like that would kind of hit up towards the top. So where you've got level 500s, that to me seems nearer 300 as it matures. And we should be preparing people to think about that longer term process, not just where it is right now. Again, very much my opinion on this, as these calls are great for, but I kind of, it just feels we haven't left much room, and to kind of keep shuffling things down as it evolves, we should be thinking ahead as to where this should be, not just where it is now.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, Kevin, because we have a starting point. We have to put something on the table and have a discussion and move those parts around, which is, again, why I like whiteboard type stuff and dragging stuff around. And I think, it is definitely a space we're not seeing anything really in terms of how do we manage this as admins. So that's definitely a big piece of maturity in an organization. How do we manage and
which will terrify
stuff?
People.
Yeah. It's coming, but
I presume because there's no
curtain.
Compliance model yet with this, is there? Or if I
they do have
it does,
because
okay.
It's sitting in SharePoint storage. It does follow all those sorts of capabilities, but the big sticking point is, but the nature of it is that it's so collaborative. So if we do rehydrate it, where do we do it? We can't even deal with it offline. So they are looking into different ways of, like, snapshot. This is what it looks like. This is the information that was there. Now you can check it out and use that. But compliance wise, I mean, even sitting in a OneDrive, if you as an organization have policies to, snapshot that and say it's still going to be there, we're going to make it always accessible but never changed, then it will still obey that as well.
Yeah, I was thinking about level 400. So level 400, we think about being able to measure usage and be able to change the way we're working. So thinking about that future, about reporting, who's using it, how often these loops getting that kind of thing. So you can start to see which patterns the organization's using, what's working well, what's not working well as well. So sort of thinking about that future state. It's a good point.
That's true. And then where would you put the management of it? I mean, it's something that really it should be down here, I guess, and defined.
Level 300. Yeah, that makes sense.
Need to see management tools.
Yeah, so maybe there is another measure which is where loop is, and it's at 200. It's still at 200. It's actually the product itself is 200, and it's
Oh yeah.
That's it.
My lens over this was purely how are we using it and working out our ways of working, but maturity models a lot larger than that.
Interesting stuff. Okay, well, technically we're up to and over time. Doesn't stop us talking, but those people that need to leave certainly can do so. I think, as I said, this was a bit of an experiment to see how can we apply a practical scenario to a forming product, and I've got some insights off the back of this conversation. The idea of maybe understanding how mature the technology itself is, and that may even put a cap on how mature the practical scenario has any capability of being. And I've not really thought about that before, because you can't be fully optimized if you've got no compliance and governance of the tool.
No. Kevin.
Interesting stuff.
It was just on Simon's comment there. I mean, should there instead be a maturity model for building in new applications within this, or new tools and services, rather than looking at Loop as something specific? Is there a way of, because I like what if we take those scenarios and take out the word loop, this fits very nicely. How are we going to use it? What are the common scenarios? What are the habits that can be used for many other services as well?
Okay,
I
that's
like that.
actually cracking. Yeah, because that really is a practical scenario. The question for us would then be, okay, great, that's a really good set of principles. How do you do that with, OneNote or some other specific technology? But it will give you a framework for doing it, and then you'd build out a product scenario as opposed to a practical scenario.
Maybe it has to be a collaborative product, because I think that same thing worked with OneNote, and the things we were talking about there about governance, about knowing training who knows how to use it would fit within that. What are the different scenarios? If I was going to apply Viva goals to that, would that be the same thing as an example? I suppose then you're still thinking about scenarios. You're still thinking about how you're going to govern those goals. Yeah, maybe it does work the same. I'm sure there's other situations.
Having a framework for that, for an app, with a product that's rolling out in early, would actually be really valuable for the maturity model, because you're giving a framework for people or organizations to understand what is this new tool and how can we explore it. And then potentially, if you be clever about it, it's guiding the creators of the software towards a level of maturity as well. What are some of the things that are non-negotiables that we must have, that you should actually have at launch? You see, Simon? Yeah. So thinking around that would be good.
I think it's just.
Oh, you're muted.
Don't know what hit there. Really good exploration of Loop. Really enjoyed that. I'm still, why have we not done this for OneNote? Why do we not do it for Excel? We drive ourselves insane if we did it for every service. But to have that new one, and to be able to, at the very least, it would make the MVP Summit questions to the kind of product group teams. We can just pick that from a tick list. We can take it in turns, asking the different maturity level questions. It's easy.
That's good call. Yeah, it gives us a framework for engaging around the products and the product teams.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Even down to features that they're building into more mature products. Where does that fit? How does it fit? We're exploring it. Does it actually meet a need, or two of your top customers ask for something really obscure and you're giving it to us? I'm not sure.
Never happens.
No.
Yeah, right.
Maybe that's something to explore on one of those gaps that you were talking about at the beginning, Simon. The future sessions.
Okay. Are you at ECS, Kevin?
No, sadly.
That's a shame. I was going to say we'll grab a glass of wine and actually talk that through a bit, but we'll have to do it some other time.
Yes. Damn families, all I'll say.
Hi,
if anyone's listening. Yeah.
Right. Look, I think we probably ought to think about winding it all up there. Otherwise, we'll carry on talking for ages and it will turn into a SharePoint instead of a practical scenario. Perfect. That was exactly what I was going to ask you to do. So just to finish it all off, my first thing is to thank you, Darrell. I know you put a chunk of effort into this, and I enjoyed getting some insight when you and I did the pre-session. And I think there's been a lot that's come out of this conversation that we haven't considered, which is kind of the point. Big thank you from all of us on the maturity model team and beyond. For everybody attending, yeah, if you want to get further involved, here's our usual bunch of lists. You know, some self-assessment stuff, our roadmap for what it's worth. Given that it changes a lot, it's almost as bad as Microsoft's. Some stuff around being able to track your organizational maturity model using a survey. All the GitHub stuff, and you know, we do get people interacting with the existing deliverables and making comments, and we act on them. It's rather good, really. All of the videos from these recordings get posted up onto our YouTube channel. It can take some weeks, but they will all get there eventually. And similarly, the slide decks get posted up. Our next session is mid-May. I have a nasty feeling I can't make that one, but anyway, the rest of the team will be there even if I'm not. That, I think, brings us to the end of the session. Thanks very much. Some of us will look forward to seeing some of you next time around.
Great. Thanks all. I'll go back to bed.
Yeah, thanks, Darrell. Late time for you. Really appreciate you staying up for us.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Good job.
Good to be able to connect with the other side of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'll see you in October in person.
Oh, what's happening in October?
You'll come to New Zealand.
Yes, got a plan for that. Definitely. All right. See you, Simon.
Cool. Good. Cheers, everybody.